This story is a work of fiction created for entertainment purposes only. Any resemblance to real people, places, or events is purely coincidental. The content does not promote or encourage inappropriate relationships. It explores emotional storytelling and human themes for mature audiences. I never expected to notice her that way. She wasn't just someone's mom to me anymore. It happened in the quiet, when the air was still, when words felt heavier than they should, when a glance stayed too long. The first time it struck me was one late afternoon in their living room. The curtains were half drawn, the last light of day sliding across the floor like a secret spilling into the room. My friend had just stepped out to take a call, leaving me alone with her, his mother. She sat across from me, leaning slightly forward, her fingers absent-mindedly circling the rim of a coffee cup. Not drinking, just tracing, as if her hands needed something to do. I should have looked away, maybe pulled out my phone, but instead I found myself caught, watching the small gestures, the ones people don't notice they make when they're not pretending. Her hair wasn't perfectly in place, not like the way she looked when neighbors stopped by. It fell loose around her shoulders, strands escaping the clip she'd tried to hold them with. And her eyes, God, they weren't just brown. They were softer, deeper, like they carried the weight of things unsaid. "Quiet one, aren't you?" she said, her voice low, almost teasing. I shifted in my seat, half smiling, half nervous. Guess so. Not much to say when everyone else talks too much. She tilted her head, studying me with the kind of focus that makes you want to straighten your posture, or maybe hide altogether. "That's not true. You've got plenty to say. You just don't waste it." I didn't answer, not because I didn't want to, but because the way she said it, it felt like she saw me more than most people ever bothered to. The silence between us wasn't empty, pressed in. I noticed the faint sound of the clock ticking on the wall, the hum of the refrigerator down the hall, even the creak of the old sofa beneath me. Every small thing was louder because of her presence. She leaned back finally, exhaling softly. "You're different from the rest." The words dropped into the room and stayed there. I laughed it off at first, a quiet chuckle to break the tension, but my chest tightened. I didn't know if she meant it as harmless or if there was something more, something she hadn't said out loud. Before I could ask, the front door rattled. My friend's voice carried in from outside, cheerful and careless, the way it always did. I sat up straighter, but she didn't move. She just kept her eyes on me for a moment longer than she should have. Her lips parted like she might say something else, something heavier. But she didn't. She only glanced away at the sound of the door unlocking. And in that stolen second, before the room filled with noise again, I knew this wasn't just another ordinary afternoon. It had shifted. Something had crossed between us, invisible but undeniable. I couldn't name it yet. Maybe I didn't want to. The text in my pocket went unread. I slipped the phone back without checking it, almost afraid it would drag me out of the strange pull of that moment. My friend was busy tossing his keys onto the table, laughing at something he'd seen outside. He didn't notice how quickly I looked away from his mom, how she straightened in her chair, how the air between us seemed to cool just enough to be safe again. Later that week, I found myself back at their house, though I hadn't planned to be. My friend had this way of inviting me over without asking, assuming I'd always be around. And usually I didn't mind. But lately it wasn't just him I thought about. She was in the kitchen when I arrived. The smell of coffee lingered, stronger than it should at that hour. She wore a sweater that looked soft, sleeves pushed up, a faint line of tiredness beneath her eyes. "You're here again," she said with the faintest smile. "Yeah," I muttered, shrugging like it was nothing. But the truth was, I'd been restless all morning, circling excuses in my head. She didn't press. She just poured a cup and set it in front of me without asking. I noticed her hands, slender, but marked with the kind of life my own hadn't yet seen. Faint scars near her knuckles. A silver band she no longer wore but whose absence was as loud as if it were still there. I remembered whispers from my friend months ago. Something about his dad leaving, about how she'd moved on but not really. I never asked. It wasn't my place. But seeing her like this, close and quiet, I couldn't stop wondering what she carried. "You ever feel," she began softly, eyes fixed on the steam rising from her mug. Like you got it wrong the first time? And now, you're just trying not to repeat it. I swallowed, caught off guard. Yeah, I said before I thought better. I think about that more than I should. She glanced up, eyebrows raised slightly, as if surprised someone my age would understand. I wanted to tell her that I'd already had my share of things ending too soon. A high school girlfriend who cheated, another who left for someone older, both teaching me how quickly people change. But I didn't. Instead, I just sat there, tracing the edge of the mug the way she had days before. The silence stretched. It wasn't empty. It was thick, heavy with what neither of us said. She shifted closer as she reached for a napkin, her arm brushing mine. Just a second, maybe less, but my chest tightened all the same. She didn't pull away quickly. Neither did I. And when she finally did, it was with the smallest sigh, the kind that said this shouldn't matter, but it does. I didn't dare look at her directly, not with my friend just down the hall. But I felt it, the quiet acknowledgement, the spark hidden in plain sight. And for the first time I realized, maybe she felt it too. It started to feel dangerous after that day in the kitchen. The way her arm had brushed mine. It stayed with me longer than I wanted to admit. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt that subtle touch again. Light as air, but enough to ignite something I couldn't smother. I tried to shake it off, but it was impossible when I kept finding myself back at their house. My friend was oblivious, still cracking jokes, dragging me into late-night video games, leaving us in the same space far too often. She avoided me at first, or maybe I imagined it. Her hellos became quick, her eyes sliding past me as if looking too long might reveal what she was hiding. But every so often, when my friend wasn't watching, I caught her gaze, and in it the same restlessness I felt. One evening, the tension finally cracked. It was raining outside, the kind of heavy rain that drowned out every other sound. My friend had gone to the store, muttering something about grabbing snacks before the storm got worse. I stayed behind, flipping aimlessly through channels on the TV. She came in quietly, standing just at the edge of the room. I noticed her reflection in the darkened window before I noticed her voice. "You don't talk much," she said. I turned, heart tightening. "You've mentioned that before." Her smile was faint, almost nervous. "It makes me wonder what you're holding back." I laughed softly, but it wasn't funny. "More than I should, probably." She crossed the room slowly, each step deliberate, like she was testing how close she could get before it became too obvious. She stopped a few feet away, folding her arms. "Sometimes silence says more than words," she whispered. I couldn't answer. My chest was heavy, my throat tight. The storm outside seemed to pulse in time with the silence between us. And then, without planning it, without meaning to, I stood. We were closer now. Too close. Her breath mingled with mine. Her eyes searching mine with something fragile. Like she was both daring me and begging me not to. I don't know if I leaned in or if she did. But in that fraction of a second, the air shifted. Our faces only inches apart. The storm outside drowning everything else out. Then the front door banged open. "Damn rain!" my friend shouted, kicking his shoes against the mat. We leapt back, the moment shattering like glass. She turned away instantly, busying herself with the remote, pretending to change the channel. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might give me away. He never noticed. He tossed the snacks on the table and started talking about the game we were supposed to play later. I barely heard him. All I could think about was how close I'd been to crossing a line I wasn't sure I could uncross. That night I couldn't sleep. Guilt gnawed at me. Guilt for wanting her. Guilt for betraying the trust of the person who considered me his closest friend. But underneath the guilt was something darker. I couldn't stop replaying it. The way she looked at me, the way she didn't pull back first. The next morning, I swore I'd keep my distance. It wasn't fair to anyone. But life has a way of testing promises. A week later, my car broke down near their neighborhood. I called my friend, but he didn't answer. Out of options, I knocked on their door. She opened it. Surprise flickered in her eyes, followed quickly by something else. Something softer. "Come in, you'll get soaked." she said, stepping aside. I hesitated only a second before stepping in. The air smelled like fresh coffee again, warm and grounding. She handed me a towel, our fingers brushing as I took it. That stupid electric jolt shot through me again, and I almost dropped it. You all right? She asked, watching me too closely. Yeah, I muttered. Just tired. But I wasn't tired. I was unraveling. We sat at the table, steam curling from 2 mugs. The silence between us was familiar now, heavy but alive. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words tangled. She broke it instead. You shouldn't be here like this. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled around the cup. I know, I said quietly, but I am. Her eyes lifted to mine. For a moment the world felt unbearably small. Just this kitchen. Just us. The rain had started again, tapping the windows like a warning. I reached out before I could stop myself. My fingers grazed hers on the table, light, hesitant. She froze, staring at the contact. And she didn't pull away. The clock ticked, the rain fell harder, and for a breathless moment, the risk, the guilt, the wrongness. All of it disappeared into the simple truth of her hand beneath mine. Then her phone buzzed on the counter. The name flashing across the screen froze both of us. It was her husband. Her phone buzzed again. Same name, same weight. She reached for it slowly, but I caught the flicker in her eyes, that hesitation, that half-second of not wanting to answer. You should. I started, but my voice cracked. She silenced the call instead, setting the phone face down on the counter. The sound of rain filled the space where words should have gone. I swallowed hard, fingers still resting on hers. Does he call often? Her lips parted, but she didn't answer right away. When she finally did, her voice was low, heavy. Enough to remind me why I shouldn't, why this can't. She trailed off, pulling her hand back. I felt the loss instantly, like the air had been yanked from my lungs. I leaned forward before I thought better. But you don't want to stop, do you? Her breath hitched, barely audible. She shook her head once, sharp, then pressed her palms against her eyes. You don't understand what you're asking. You're too young. You don't know what it costs to break something that already barely holds together. I should have let it go. I should have laughed it off, made an excuse to leave, buried this whole thing in silence. But jealousy crept in, raw and uninvited. You're afraid of him finding out, I said bitterly. Not of me. Her hands fell from her face. She stared at me like I'd stripped her bare with those words. Don't, she whispered. Don't twist this into something selfish. Selfish. My voice was sharper than I meant. You're the one who looked at me like I was more than just a kid hanging around your house. You started this. Her chest rose and fell quickly, anger and something else burning in her eyes. She stood abruptly, pushing her chair back with a scrape. Maybe I made a mistake. The words hit harder than I expected. I stood too, unable to stay still. No, you don't get to say that. Not after. I stopped myself, fists clenching. Her silence cut through me. The storm outside raged harder, wind rattling the windows, as if echoing the storm in the room. Then, finally, her voice cracked. You make me feel alive again, and that terrifies me. My pulse hammered. She hadn't meant to say it. I could see it in her face, the instant regret, the trembling in her hands. But the truth was out, sharp and unfixable. I stepped closer, close enough to see the faint line at the corner of her mouth, close enough to feel the warmth radiating off her. Then stop pretending, I whispered. She didn't move, didn't step back. Her eyes darted to my lips, just once, quick and guilty. The air between us tightened, electric, fragile. One step, one breath, that was all it would take. And then, footsteps sounded in the hallway. The footsteps drew closer, each creak of the floorboards slicing through the charged silence between us. She stepped back, fast, almost stumbling into the counter as I turned toward the sound. It wasn't my friend. It was her daughter. I hadn't even realized she was home. She appeared in the doorway, damp hair tucked behind her ears, earbuds dangling around her neck. She looked between us. First me, then her mother, with a sharpness that made my stomach drop. "What's going on?" she asked. Her mom's voice was steady, too steady. "Nothing. He was just waiting out the rain." I nodded quickly, too quickly. My pulse thudded in my ears. Her daughter raised an eyebrow. "Right?" The word hung in the air, sharp with doubt, before she disappeared down the hall without another glance. A door shut hard enough to rattle the frame. The silence left behind was worse than anything. She pressed her palms against the counter, shoulders tight. "She saw," she whispered, almost to herself. "Nothing happened," I said, desperate. "We didn't." "That doesn't matter." Her voice cracked, then softened, trembling. "She's not stupid. She saw enough." God, what was I thinking? The shame in her eyes hit me harder than anger would have. I wanted to close the distance, to tell her it didn't have to mean disaster. But a darker thought rooted in me. What if she told? What if my friend found out from his sister instead of from me? The fragile secret we'd been holding wasn't ours anymore. "I should go," I muttered, grabbing my jacket from the chair. But she caught my wrist. Her hand was small, warm, desperate. "Don't. Please." I froze. She almost never asked me for anything. Her eyes, glassy now, searched mine like she was trying to memorize me before I vanished. "You don't understand," she whispered. "If this comes out, it won't just ruin me. It'll ruin you." I swallowed hard. Maybe it's already too late. Her grip faltered, but she didn't let go. "I can't lose everything again. Not because I was careless." Again, the word lingered, and in it, I heard the truth she'd never said out loud. Her marriage, her past mistakes, the regrets that kept her awake at night. She wasn't afraid of me. She was afraid of repeating history. "I don't care what it costs me," I said, softer than I meant to. "I care about—" I stopped. The words nearly slipped out, reckless and raw. She shook her head quickly, like she couldn't bear to hear the end. "Don't say it, please." But her hand still held mine. And in that moment, it wasn't denial in her eyes. It was longing, terrified and undeniable. The house felt too quiet, too fragile. I knew then, everything had changed. Nothing was safe anymore. And when her phone buzzed again on the counter, this time with a message preview flashing clear enough for both of us to read. "We need to talk. I know something's wrong." It was her husband. Her husband's message glared at us from the screen, unblinking, impossible to ignore. She picked up the phone with trembling hands, turned it over once, twice, then set it back down like it was a weapon she couldn't disarm. Neither of us spoke at first. The rain outside softened, but inside the storm was louder than ever. Finally, she whispered, "He knows. Maybe not everything, but he knows." I took a step closer, not caring anymore if it was reckless. "Then tell me what you want. Do you want me to walk away, pretend this never happened? Or do you want me to stay?" Her eyes lifted, wet and unsteady. "You make it sound simple." "Because it is," I said, though my throat burned. "It's one or the other. Silence or truth. Fear or—" I broke off, unable to say the word love, though it pressed hard against my chest. She laughed, bitter and small. "You think love fixes everything? That it erases years' mistakes? The fact that I'm old enough to—" She stopped herself, biting her lip. I reached out, taking her hand again. "You're not too old for this. For me. You're the first person who's ever looked at me like I wasn't just passing through their life." Her breath caught. She squeezed my hand once, as if testing if I was real. "You don't understand what you're risking." "I don't care," I said. "I care about you." The silence that followed was unbearable. Her face shifted through regret, fear, something dangerously close to hope. Then she pulled me in, fast and trembling, pressing her forehead against mine. Her voice broke into the smallest confession. "I don't want to be afraid anymore." We stood there, the world narrowing to breath and heartbeat, her fingers tangled with mine. For a second, I believed this was the choice, that she had chosen me. But then her phone buzzed again. The sound jolted us apart, reality clawing its way back in. Her eyes met mine, and I saw the war inside her. Wanting me, fearing him, regretting everything and nothing all at once. She wiped her eyes quickly, forcing her voice steady. I have to answer him. I nodded, though it felt like tearing something out of myself. I know. She held my gaze one last time, longer than she should have, like she was memorizing me. Then she turned toward the phone. I stood frozen, knowing whatever came next would decide everything. As her thumb hovered over the screen, she whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "Don't give up on me." And then she answered the call. Her voice on the phone was careful, practiced, like someone walking across thin ice. "Yes, I'm fine. We'll talk when you get home." Each pause felt like a hammer strike in my chest. When she hung up, the silence was different, heavier, final in a way. She didn't look at me right away. She just stood there, staring at the phone as though it had decided our future for us. "I should tell you to go," she said softly. "I should end this before it destroys us both." I nodded, though my feet wouldn't move. "But you don't want to." Her laugh came out broken. "No. God help me, I don't." We stood inches apart, the storm outside easing into quiet drizzle, the smell of wet earth drifting in through the half-open window. It felt like the world was holding its breath for us. Finally, she turned to me. Her face was raw, stripped of all the defenses she'd worn since the beginning. "I've lived most of my life holding back, doing what was safe, what was expected, and I'm still empty." I swallowed hard, waiting. Her hand lifted, hesitated, then rested gently against my cheek. "But when you're here, I forget all that. I feel—" She stopped, searching for the word. "Alive. And I don't want to give that up, no matter how wrong it looks from the outside." I covered her hand with mine. "Then don't." The dam finally broke. She leaned in, not tentative this time, but certain, like a choice made after years of silence. Our lips met, and the fear, the guilt, the hesitation. It all burned away in that moment, leaving only the truth neither of us could deny anymore. When we pulled apart, her eyes glistened, but her smile was real, fragile but real. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." I held her gaze, feeling the weight and the relief of those words. Together. The house was still. No more buzzing phones, no more footsteps down the hall. Just us, standing in a quiet kitchen that had become the center of our world. Maybe tomorrow would bring consequences. Maybe her daughter would ask questions. Maybe her husband would dig deeper. Maybe it would all collapse. But tonight, in that fragile space carved out by honesty and risk, we weren't hiding anymore. I slipped my fingers between hers, grounding us both. "You're different from the rest," I said quietly, repeating the words she'd once spoken to me, the words that had started all of this. Her smile deepened, a mixture of relief and defiance. "And so are you." The storm outside had passed, but inside something new had begun. C1.